Hello dear viewers, a very warm welcome to our channel. It's very good to have you here. In this video we're going to have a look at top symptoms of a failing alternator. The alternator is here to supply electricity to the entire vehicle once the engine is started. As you can see, it is driven by a belt from the engine crankshaft, and once the engine crankshaft starts rotating, it will rotate the alternator rotor, and that will generate electricity, and the output of the alternator will be used to recharge the battery and supply any electrical loads that are required. And the battery voltage is 12.6 volts when it is fully charged, but the alternator output is usually 14 volts. For example, when you look at the specification on this alternator, right here it says it generates 14 volts. It is a regulated voltage that is coming out of this. Because the alternator output is greater than the battery voltage, it will be charging the car battery and also supplying electricity to the remaining car electrical systems. A failing alternator can cause various problems. Electrical problems and mechanical issues can happen as a result of a failing alternator. Let's have a look at some of the top symptoms indicating a failing alternator. Well, the first noticeable sign of a failing alternator is a charge warning light illuminated on your dashboard. The battery warning light or charge warning light is the most early sign in the battery warning system that tells if there is something wrong with the charging system. For example, if the output of the alternator is lower than the battery voltage, when the alternator is not producing output voltage at all, the charge warning light will remain illuminated on your dashboard. So that is the number one indication of a failing alternator or a failing charging system. The other indicator is flickering headlights. As you can see, when engine is started, we've said the alternator will be responsible for supplying electricity to all accessories, and when the headlights are turned on and when they start flickering while the engine is running, it indicates fluctuation on the alternator output, or it indicates weak alternator output. So the alternator is responsible for powering every electrical output, and the headlights they draw large amount of current relative to other electrical loads. So dimming or flickering headlights, especially at idle, indicate weak alternator. Frequent dead battery is another indication of a failing alternator. As we have said, one of the responsibility of the alternator is to recharge the battery once the engine is started. If that recharging is not done effectively, it will cause dead battery. So dead or weak battery, a failing alternator, will not be charging the battery sufficiently, and that can cause the battery to go bad. So frequent dead battery issues, even after a jump start, can be an indication of a failing alternator as well. Electrical failures are another symptoms. Electrical failures like electrical loads such as power windows, radios, or power seats. If these stop functioning properly, that can also be an indication of an alternator failure. Power windows, radios, infotainment systems, and other electrical systems may work intermittently, or they may start dying if the alternator is not providing sufficient voltage. So failure of these electrical accessories working is also an indication of alternator problem. The other indication of a bad alternator is unusual noise. If there is a strange noise coming from the alternator, that could be an indication of a failing alternator. Now, the alternator has the rotor that is supported on bearings. There is one bearing on the front end here. This is the front end, the front cover of the alternator. There is one bearing in this, and on the rear also there is another bearing that is supporting the alternator rotor. A worn-out alternator bearing can produce grinding, whining, or growling noise from the engine bay. So if you happen to notice that kind of strange noise, that could be an indication of a failing alternator. Sometimes when there is a problem with the belt, when it is gone bad, when it is worn out, or when the tension on the belt is not correctly adjusted, you might hear a characteristic belt screaming noise. That could be also an indication of a bad alternator belt as well. Engine stalling or engine misfire can sometimes be an indication of a failing alternator or charging system problem. As we have said earlier, once engine is started, electrical loads are supposed to be handled by the alternator. Now, if the alternator is not properly doing that, a failing alternator can cause spark plugs to produce weak spark, and that will result in rough idling, engine stalling, or sometimes even it can lead to engine misfire. If you happen to notice some burning smell from the alternator side, that is also another indication of a failing alternator. A failing alternator can overheat. There is a winding in here, the stator winding. When there is massive current passing through as a result of a short circuit or whatever, or an overloaded alternator, when there is a overheating, that will produce burning smell, electrical smell or burning rubber smell. Due to this, that can be an indication of a failing alternator as well. If you touch it and happen to notice there is excessive heat, overheating alternator, or if you happen to notice a belt friction and belt starting to glaze and produce some kind of pungent smell, all that could be an indication of some kind of resistance inside the alternator. So a failing alternator can overheat. It can cause a burning smell that smells like electrical burning or sometimes rubber burning when the belt has a problem. A slow or malfunctioning accessories, as we have mentioned earlier, can also be attributed to alternator problem. If there is a problem with the power window, if there is a problem with the power seat, if you have a problem with the wiper and defogger systems, all this may be, if the alternator is not functioning properly, they might start to work slowly. That can also be an indication of a failing alternator as well. In some extreme cases, if there is a problem with the alternator, you will have difficulty starting the engine. The alternator, when it is not properly functioning, that will cause a poor battery, and that poor battery is integrated with a malfunctioning alternator, make it difficult for the engine to start readily. So weak alternators may not produce enough power. That will cause the overall starting system to function slowly, slow cranking, and in some extreme cases, no starting at all could be attributed to alternator problem as well. If you happen to measure the alternator output, it is usually measured at the battery, and if you notice the voltage is below 13 volt, whether you accelerate or not, if the voltage is very slow, if it is below 13 volt, if it is like 12.6, 12.5 something, that could be an indication of a failing alternator as well. A healthy alternator should be producing voltage between 13.5 up to 14.5 in a 12 volt system, and it should be producing 28 or 27 volts in a 24 volt system. If that is not the case, that indicates a battery charging system not functioning properly. That would be caused by a failing alternator. So there are some things that you can do in order to exactly determine if the charging system is not functioning properly or not. Grab a multimeter and test the alternator output. Measure the battery voltage when the engine is running. It should be between 13.5 up to 14.5 volt when the engine is running and when you are accelerating. If it is not between those two values, it indicates the alternator is not functioning properly. If it is beyond 14.8, that indicates the regulator of the alternator is not functioning properly. If it is below 13.5, if it is below some 12 point something, that is an indication of a charging output which is not properly charging the battery, or low alternator output, or no alternator output as well. And you can also check for electrical connections. There are electrical connections at the back of the alternator. Make sure that they are not loose. Make sure that they are properly connected. And also check the condition of this belt. This is the alternator belt. It has to be tight enough. It should not be loose. So that has to be also checked. If you find out there is a problem, replacing the alternator might be required in order to fix the problem. So these are some of the top symptoms of a failing alternator. If you find any of these symptoms, it is very good idea to have the alternator system get repaired as soon as possible. Well, dear viewers, that is all we have for you regarding some of the symptoms of a bad charging system alternator. If you find this video helpful and if you like what has been presented, please smash the like button. If you are new to this channel, do consider subscribing, turn on notifications so that you will be the first to get notified whenever we come up with another video. Until then, stay safe.